G'day, we are students studying and assessing the remediation practices in the Stories Creek area, which contains contaminants associated with local mining operations. We'll outline the site characteristics and their contamination, some remediation strategies, costing, and their effectiveness. But first, what makes the site special? Stories Creek is in northeast Tasmania, close to the Rossitten township there, and all the rain that falls south of Ben Lomond flows into South Esk River, which goes towards Launceston there, Tasmania's second biggest city. Deeper interest comes from looking at the mine itself, which, though a significant polluter, did not produce insignificant yields of tin and tungsten concentrates. These significant yields brought prosperity to Rossitten, particularly during war times, and the heritage of this can be seen laying strewn across the mine sites in the form of historical equipment which has been abandoned. This further complicates the remediation strategy because while restoration of the environment is of key importance, restoration of this key heritage to the community is also important.
The layout of Story Creek is about 24 kilometers in length and 1.34 kilometers elevated from sea level. Aberfoyle Creek merges into Story Creek, which then enters South Esk River, that is used for recreational activities and water supply. On the left figure, it shows the mining area of Story Creek and the mining area of Rossitten. On the top figure displays the fold as well as the soil profile of Story Creek, which comprise of Maffina group as well as sand, clay, gravel, and sludge. The source of contamination begins with deep mining and disposal of waste. Both actions cause spread of heavy metal such as cadmium, aluminium, and much more. This in turn contaminated the water as well as sediments around the creek. The effects of contamination caused erosion, disposition, environmental stress towards flora and fauna, and high cost to repair the lands and water qualities in the area. Water qualities have been sampled at various parts of Story Creek, Aberfoyle Creek, and South Esk River. Each sampling has shown that various metal had exceeded ANZECC guidelines, though cadmium had exceeded in each sampling locations. As shown in this figure, estimated loads of metals acidity and alkalinity in Stories, Aberfoyle, and South Esk are measured as a percentage of Stories Creek above South Esk River. In this table, the X denotes the contaminants that have exceeded the guidelines. As shown, the contamination in Stories Creek have exceeded aquatic life standards and most of the drinking water standards. This may be due to long-term mining in the area, as well as unsafe practice. With risk assessment of Stories Creek, it will be primarily focused on the area in Stories Creek mine, since the area was the most contaminated as evidenced in the last slide. Spread of heavy metal as dust particle is a high risk due to the control being inefficient at capturing dust particles. Water contamination is an extreme risk due to the material of the dam being damaged and water level being too high, thus being less efficient. Sediment contamination is an extreme risk for not having as much control compared to the other hazards.
Hello, my name is Brad and I'll be presenting the site remediation strategies for our selected case study, Stories Creek. So, Stories Creek in its current state is considered as unacceptable due to the site being significantly contaminated with heavy metals, which is as a result from the site being subject to metalliferous mining. In particular, the main heavy metal contamination is zinc, cadmium, copper, aluminium and lead. This severe contamination needs to be rectified and remediated accordingly, as contamination of these heavy metals can lead to serious environmental, ecosystem, and human implications. For this site, there exists a plethora of suitable site remediation strategies. However, for the purpose of this presentation and the project report, three main strategies will be discussed. The main strategies include encapsulation of contaminated tailings and adding lime for site stabilisation, phytoremediation, and ALDs, anoxic limestone drains. Firstly, remediation strategy 1, which is the encapsulation of contaminated tailings and the addition of lime for site stabilisation. This process involves the relocation of mine tailings to a suitable area where they then can be capped with a layer of clay to ensure the contaminants are safely contained. Subsequently, the site will then be treated using a lime stabilisation technique to ensure all the residual contamination is treated. This strategy increases the pH from an acidic state to an alkaline state, which inevitably significantly reduces the concentration of heavy metals. Addedly, this method of remediation has a moderate cost associated with it. The next remediation strategy is phytol remediation. It is an in-situ based remediation technique where plant-based technology is used to remediate the site. The technique uses specific plants to remove the contaminants that are present within the soil. It is a particularly effective technique for heavy metals. The process in which the heavy metals are extracted from the soil is called uptake, whereby the heavy metals leach into the soil and groundwater, enters through the roots of the plants in one of two ways, through the apoplastic pathway or the symplastic pathway. This method is one of the most cost-effective remediation techniques that exist. However, the main drawback is that it is a relatively slow process of remediation. The last remediation technique is anoxic limestone drains, otherwise referred to as ALDs. This technique is another in-situ based strategy that is specifically designed to treat acidic mine-influenced contamination. Within the drain, a limestone layer exists to increase the pH of a contaminated substance to an alkaline level. The advantages of this method is that it is low in cost and begins to remediate immediately after installation. However, the most significant limitation is that it is only appropriate for specific conditions. Luckily, heavy metal contamination is one of them.
Site contaminants being identified. Trial testing of alkalinity remediation was trialled through crushed lime dosing and limestone sand addition trials. An anoxic limestone drain was also trialled in an area that was saturated from the mine tailings ponds. These trial tests indicated that alkalinity addition would both be a feasible and effective method. This was primarily due to the analysis that the soil and water in the Stories Creek area showed little to no acid buffering properties, therefore low pH conditions would occur, which would cause the metals to remain in a mobile phase. Due to the preliminary trials and analysis showing that alkalinity would be an effective treatment to the Stories Creek area, a range of remediation works were undertaken as follows. The relocation of 64,000 metres cubed of precipitate tailings dam was undertaken where the contaminated material was sealed and compacted under a clay barrier. The material was also neutralised using 50 tonnes of agricultural limestone prior to encapsulation. Agricultural grade limestone was added to the jigs tailing stockpiles across the site, as well as 400 tonnes added to Stories Creek itself, with an additional 170 tonnes of limestone spread across the banks in 4 different locations. The construction of an anoxic limestone drain was predicted to generate adequate alkalinity in the lower water sources, with a 2.5 metre deep anoxic limestone drain being constructed, containing 1,100 tonnes of limestone with a 300 ml layer of hay and manure. This anoxic limestone drain was situated uphill of the Story Creek mine site and was predicted to have a significant effect on the resulting water quality below. In conjunction to the above remediation works, a 2 metre concrete plug was installed in the eastern adit, as well as 60,000 metres cube of jig tailings dams was relocated, neutralised and encapsulated using 800 tonnes of limestone. The maps here indicate the relevant remediation work locations and type of remediation technique employed. The red line shown in the right map section highlights the location and quantity of agricultural limestone addition to the creek banks. The resulting water qualities in 2002 of the nearby water bodies are shown, which indicate a relatively successful remediation work. In comparison to the 1997 water quality, major improvements are noticed in the South Esk areas, where the resulting water quality meets the ANZ ECC guidelines in all categories. Stories Creek, however, showed less improvements, with 6 contaminants still being above the guidelines. Whilst the overall contaminant removal from the remediation works seems underwhelming, continued improvements are expected over time.
In this project, the total expense of remediation works is approximately $1 million, and the initial cost for this project is that $925,400, which is including investigating and drill cost, and the following maintenance fee is that $110,000. Furthermore, the project expenses mainly consist by 4 parts. The first part is conceptual and investigation. The second part of project expense is preparing the precipitate dam. After releasing the conceptual report, It shows that a storage creek environment is essentially less ability for neutralizing or buffering acid contaminants. Besides, the release of contaminated metals are still in erratic environment, so the pH would significantly decrease after adding any acid addition. So as a result, additional 100 tons of limestone sand was spread into 4 locations as initial raised pH treatment. The design expense is nearly $400,000 for accomplishment of relocating place, which is a precipitate dam. Besides, initial 100 tons of limestone occupy 5,500 budget and periodically charged annually. So our next project expense is limestone addition. So while in the operating, limestone material was decided into 2 phases to firstly, crushed limestone was used for jig tailing itself. Secondly, crushed limestone was applied to the tailing area from Rosaden to Story Creek area. Through the laboratory tests of limestone material and tailing, the result shows that each ton of crushed limestone could neutralize 10 kg of jig tailing, which pH equal to 7. The last project expense is anorthosic limestone drain. As mentioned before, alkalinity addition was chosen as an increasing pH handling process to the storage creek. The working storage creek area have 2 main adits need to be installed with pipeline for drainage. Both of adits are located at Aberfoyle Creek, which is used for draining, and 2 different adits should be lined up with 6 km surface drainage pipeline by helicopter. The cost for initial installing of the pipeline is nearly $52,500, and the annual maintenance expense is $10,000. There are also few expense items shows annually in table.
The precipitation dam and fine limestone addition have no residual impact. What did work well is the ALD and coarse limestone addition, which buffered against both advective sources and diffuse sources. And the relocation of tailings was effective, but continual monitoring of the erosion on that site is recommended. As far as other future plans, careful monitoring shouldn't make anything an issue because the results have already been significant. What will need to be done is monitoring of the ALD organic layer, which could expire in 5 to 10 years.